everyone. So, this is our lecture on emotional self care. So, this is one of my favorite self care topics. I'm excited to go over this one with you guys. So, the quote here is I recognize there's a spelling error in the because, but let's move on beyond that. But basically, it's love yourself first because that's who you will be spending the rest of your life with. So, I think that's really beautiful. So, this is going to go a lot into self love and self worth. So, emotional self care. Some bullet points for it is that, it strengthens your ability to manage difficult emotions. It helps us stop avoiding our more difficult feelings. It expands your tolerance for emotional pain. It helps us to be less reactive when we experience intense emotion. So, um, this is emotional self care is really more about not feeling the bad feelings, the harder feelings, right? It's helping us strengthen our ability to feel them and to respond to them through healthy manners. So, like I just said, it helps us respond effectively when your feelings are being dismissed or invalidated by others. So it can help us have more strength to be able to tell someone when we're feeling mistreated, right? Helps us be able to put boundaries up. It helps us learn our emotional trigger. So, what really does cause us to have this shift in an emotional state? So, if we're feeling happy and all of a sudden something happens and we are feeling stressed or wanting to run, wanting to freeze, our stress response system is activated basically, or all of a sudden feeling really low and down, or really irritated, right? So this can help us learn what's causing that, to help us, one, work on those and reduce them, but also reduce our reaction to them, because we can't control, triggers. Basically, they're happening outside of our control. And then helps us take care of ourselves when we are experiencing emotional pain. So it's we might be going through something that is really challenging. Maybe it's grief. We lost a loved one, or maybe it's the end of a relationship or the end of a friendship that's been very meaningful to you. And so it's our ability to manage to have, to feel those hard feelings, to not avoid them, and to still take care of ourselves while we're experiencing those hardships. And so we need our emotions to survive, right? It's really what makes us human. So, for example, if we didn't feel fear, we wouldn't be able to be motivated to take measures to stay safe. So, if we didn't fear, crossing a busy highway, what would motivate us to not do that, right? And so we need our feelings. They help us take inspired action and to make decisions. So when something makes us feel really icky and really awful repeatedly, it helps give us more motivation to make a decision to change that. Or it could be the polar opposite, where something makes us feel really good and we're like, oh, okay, maybe I need to explore that further and do more of that. Emotions allow us also to communicate effectively with others. For example, just thinking about like reading even just like nonverbal cues from someone. We can recognize when someone looks upset, right? And checking in with them. Or we can recognize when someone's response is encouraging you, and you feel motivated by it, or it's kind of communicating to you like that they are not having it. And so they really do help us communicate with one another. Emotional self-care 100% requires self-awareness and self-reflection. I personally think all categories of self-care require self-awareness and self-reflection, but it's definitely important here with our emotions, right? Because there can be times where we're feeling feelings, and I'm a therapist, and there's times where I'm just feeling down, or maybe I'm feeling worried, and I'm just like, what's going on? Why do I feel this way? And with a lot of practice, I still have a hard time sometimes differentiating between maybe just a lack of sleep or hormonal imbalances, or something's bothering me that's actually happening in the workplace or with relationships or with my kids. And so it takes that self-insight, that self-awareness to be like, oh, something's happening. Like, let's check in. You're going to hear that all through the semester from me. Emotional self-care requires us to hold our emotions a little lighter. So this means we're not going to become overly engulfed by our emotions. We're not going to be so attached we can't let go. So it's really about being able to let them come and go. And so I have this book I read to my kids, and it's about riding the waves. And, it goes for adults too. And this goes with a little bit of just mindfulness as well. It's understanding that emotions come and go, and recognizing them. I'm feeling really tightness in my chest. My muscles are contracting, I'm tight, and I'm holding my fist and clenching my jaw, and feeling really nervous, and my head's going a mile a minute. What's going on? And letting yourself know, like, this will pass. You feel like this right now, but you won't always feel like this. Same with feeling really low. It's recognizing that you feel really sad, and you feel maybe a lot of grief on something, but reminding yourself that this wave will pass too. And I don't mean that in the sense of being passive. It's just knowing that it will pass, and it's okay to feel those feelings right then. And so when I say that, it's like, I don't want you to feel so depressed and just being like, I'm going to sit here until it passes. And maybe that is what you need. Maybe you do need to chill and get some rest. But not all the time. It might mean that you need to take some action, such as seeking support from friends and family that are there to support you, seeking help from school staff that you trust, seeking help from a doctor, or looking up a therapist to see. And so it doesn't always mean being passive. It's just knowing that our emotions change, and we will not be stuck in a state forever. And I think that also goes with feeling joy and happiness, is like just allowing yourself to feel that way, and knowing that you're going to feel bad again, and that's okay. But that doesn't take away from the joy you feel in the moment. And it doesn't mean you have to feel less happiness in the moment to try to control, when you feel bad again. You can feel that joy completely. Enjoy that moment. And when you don't feel joy and you feel bad, know the joy is coming again. And so that can bring a lot of internal peace to yourself, right? A lot of people are raised, and a lot of males in our society are raised to not show and express their feelings, right? It shows weakness. This could go for females as well. But the old saying, like, boys don't cry. And they do cry, and they should cry, right? That's an emotional release. There is literally this like catharsis to our body that when we cry, it releases, oh my gosh, so much yummy stuff, chemicals in our body. It really is really great for you. And so, but we can show our feelings to others. And that doesn't mean we're weak. It actually means we're really strong and brave and vulnerable. And that might feel a little icky at times, but that's okay, because you're getting your voice heard. Doesn't mean it's always reciprocated. It doesn't mean it's always supported from the other person, but then that means you're learning something about them, right? If you're feeling low and you share that and someone doesn't lend a hand or hear you, or they dismiss you, that's giving you knowledge that you needed, right? As well, to make informed decisions on who's in your life and who's not as much a part of your life. Also with becoming too attached with your feelings. So that's this is the end of the world. I'll never feel better. I always feel like this. I'm just going to self-destruct, right? I am going to tune out, not let anyone in. I'm going to binge eat to make myself feel better, and I'm never leaving my room. And so, it's this really of kind of like knowing you feel sad, and I'm going to hold it and I'm going to feel it, but I'm not going to let it over consume me, where then I feel like I almost have no control, right? And so, sure, we can't fully control our emotional states, but we can remind ourselves that we do have some control, right? That we don't have to go into this full negative reaction, negative response to our feelings. So I hope I explained that well. And if you have any questions, please let me know. So we can have different relationships with our feelings. I know the more I've talked about this with different students, is we can have kind of a piece of each type of relationship with our feelings, and it kind of changes per person we're with. And I think that's really powerful to even have that self-insight. And so the different types are passive, aggressive, and assertive. And so I'm first going to explain what each of them are, and then you can kind of think about where you fit in with that, with those relationships with your feelings, and do they change with different people? And I'll try to think of examples for myself as well. And so the passive state with our relationship with our feelings is more like that sense of we're enslaved by them. They control us. We really react to what our feelings are telling us to do. So if we feel depressed, we're just going to lay down all day, right? And binge eat and watch television. Or maybe it's even, I'm not going to eat anything, right? And I'm just going to feel sad and not talk to people. This is as opposed to really reflecting on our emotional state and knowing what we kind of need to do to feel better, right? We can have an aggressive relationship with our feelings where we really insist that these emotions need to be better, or they need to be different. We might have a difficult time to make space for painful emotions, so we might distract ourselves from them, or we might even do self-harm emotionally or physically to really avoid negative emotional states. So that could be drugs and alcohol. That could be impulse shopping. That could be hurting ourselves physically. Many different activities we could be doing to actually just avoiding the harder feelings to feel, right? Then there's assertive, which is the third relationship we can have to our feelings. And this is more of willing to have our uncomfortable emotional states. We recognize that these painful moments won't always feel this way. We're willing to say how we really feel without worrying if that will make others feel uncomfortable. And so that's a huge component, right? Is that we're allowing ourselves to feel a certain feeling, and then on top of it, we're able to communicate it with others, which can always be pretty hard to do, right? And not worrying about how they're going to take it. Like, oh, I'm worried if I share I'm not doing well, my mom's going to be upset. And I don't want her to be upset, so I'm just not going to tell her. And then there's another part is we understand that we can't control our emotions, but we know we still have an influence on them, right? So we can, let's say we can influence our emotions by, like, for example, my environment. My environments around me really are powerful to my mental health. So if I'm feeling anxious, I really need to make sure my environment is clean. I like a clean environment regardless, right? But when I'm feeling anxious, though, I can't have clutter around me, because then I feel like my environment is matching what I'm feeling in my brain, which is cluttered. And that's what I feel when I'm feeling anxious. It's just a clutter of thoughts. And so it helps me to create a relaxing atmosphere. And that means less clutter. It means turning on the diffusers. It might mean having relaxing music that's calming, lower lighting, natural lighting, to really help influence my emotional states, right? But not control them. It's like, I recognize I'm feeling anxious. This is what I can do to help it feel a little better. And so now that I've kind of ran through them, I want you to kind of take some reflective time to really think about your relationships with your feelings. And do you always feel passive, aggressive, or assertive with them? Or is it different with different relationships? And once we kind of can identify some of these parts to us, this is where we can really make change. This is where we really can be like, oh, wow, I have a pretty aggressive relationship with my feelings, and I need to let go of control more. I need to just release, right? A little bit of that false sense of control, right? Because realistically, we really can't be in full control of our emotions. It's a false sense. And so allowing ourselves to kind of just surrender. And so that might be a goal you have for yourself. Or maybe it's, gosh, I'm too passive and I need to share my feelings more and with others and not worry about how they're going to take it. Or I need to work on knowing that when I do feel sad, or knowing when I do get a bad grade, or knowing when I do get rejected by someone, that it's not always going to feel that bad. It's going to feel better. So here we kind of fall into knowing your worth. So I'm going to tell you right now, you are 150% worth feeling valuable, and you're worth feeling, you're worthy of love, you're worthy of respect, and you're worthy of a fulfilling life. And so I write a blog on different self-care, different wellness topics, motherhood, as well as relationships. And so I actually just did one last week on self-worth and really what is it. And it's I think it's a deeper construct than some people realize. And also it's kind of a topic of, okay, but how do we improve our self-worth, right? And so a lot of self-worth really has to do with like our inner voice and what it's telling us, and we can't 100% change our thoughts, right? So there's a component of giving yourself grace to know that, and that knowing it's a path to improving your self-worth. We won't always feel 100% like we're worthy of something, but working on that. Sometimes we can experience traumas in our life that truly convince us that we're not worthy of something. And maybe it's that we had a parent walk out on us when we were really young. Let's say it was your male figure. Your male figure walked out on you very young. Or your mom figure did, right? Your female did. And then you grow up and you are in intimate relationships with, the same sex that walked out on you, and you get rejected a few times. You might start to develop this, I'm not worthy of love. And maybe you even had it to begin with, and then those young adulthood relationships or adulthood relationships are now validating that concept. And now you're really stuck in this, like, I'm not worthy of that love. But I'm telling you, you are worthy of love. And that people's reactions to you do not dictate your worth at all, whatsoever. If someone treated you unfairly, that's their stuff that they need to work through. It's not a reflection of what you're worth, of who you are as a person, right? This can also include maybe like losing your job and connecting that to your self-worth, or losing your income, or not being able to take care of people that matter to you when they need help. You still have self-worth under all of those items. And so one thing that I was just talking about in my blog was, what are some tools to help us feel more worthy? It's one thing is really taking time for yourself, like a day, an hour, a week, whatever you need to really reconnect with yourself and really and when I say connect, I mean like journaling, being in nature, non-distractive activities, right? Not just like just drowning out in TV or scrolling on the phone. Connecting activities. Maybe it's listening to music. It could even be, socializing with others. It could be attending a self-help group or reading a book. It could be going to yoga meditation classes. And these types of environments can really help you connect back with who you are at your core. And those items and knowing who you are at your core can help you realize that I am a great person. And even if you have it's accepting and acknowledging that maybe even at your core, there's things like for me at my core, I know I'm sensitive. Some people might take that as a negative. Sometimes it is a negative for me, right? But that's something who I am at my core. But I know that that doesn't, just because that's who I am at my core, maybe I'm sensitive, maybe I have a hard time accepting rejection or something like that, that doesn't make my worthiness factor go down, right? So it's like really knowing who ourselves are at our core can help us feel more connected with ourselves and really know what we are worth. Because when we know what we're worth, that's when we can see the boundaries come in, right? That's when we can see us put up boundaries, when we really do know what we're worth. And so I think that's really wonderful. I think there's a lot that goes into self-worth. Yeah, I think that's all that I have on that point. I feel like I'm missing something, so that's why I'm pausing, but it's not coming to me right now. I know later I'm going to go, oh yeah. Okay. We're going to go into self-compassion. And so when I say give yourself grace, that's having self-compassion. And so how we can practice self-compassion is basically the next time you fail or make a mistake, it's talking to yourself the same way as you would to your best friend, right? It's not beating yourself up. It's not saying, I'm so stupid. Oh gosh, why do I have to be such a screw up, right? It's acknowledging you made a mistake and it's just okay. I have made a lot of self-growth in this. I honestly, I make mistakes all the time at work. And I just say, as a supervisor even, oh, my apologies. I completely forgot about that. Oh, shoot, I'd never sent that off, right? And it's sometimes it might eat at me a little bit, oh, I can't believe I forgot that. But I'm not going to sit there and beat myself up over it. Why? Because the question I'm going to ask next is, how do you benefit by beating yourself up for making a mistake, right? How do you benefit from it? Do we learn from making mistakes? Absolutely. I know I for sure do. I learn by making mistakes, but I don't benefit by beating myself up after making the mistake, right? So just be kind to yourself and focus on the growth you make from, your experiences. All right, so knowing our triggers. And so triggers, what is a trigger? A trigger is something that literally acts as a trigger, like it's pulling the trigger on a gun. So let's say you're feeling great and all of a sudden here's a great trigger someone shared with me the other day that they have from their husband is, this is for example, a wife who has a dad who was abusive and had narcissistic tendencies. And so whenever their dad started to huff and puff doing housework, she knew a blow up was coming from him. And so her anxiety would rise, right? And then there's her stress response was activated. And so she has, done a lot of therapy, and now being with her husband, who isn't those qualities of the dad, but the trigger is now when her husband starts to huff and puff doing housework, right? Maybe he can't figure something out, and so his release is just going, oh, how do I do this, right? but he doesn't do the next part. He doesn't do the next part that's blowing up, but he did do the trigger part for her. And so once she learns that that's a trigger, she can now identify when it's happening and improve her response to it. Her stress response system is not going to be as activated. So this is where therapy can come into play from dealing with trauma, right? Is yes, trauma changes us and it changes our brain activity, absolutely, our connections, but there's growth to be made, and that's the beautiful part. And so this is where we can make growth, right? Is knowing our triggers, sharing what our triggers are with the loved ones, not expecting, and maybe there's things our partners can do or people in our lives can do to lower the amount of times they do that trigger. Like maybe it's, for example, someone slamming doors or slamming cupboards. That's something I think that they could work on, right? But they're not perfect. And so it's like you can't get mad at them when they do it per se, but talking to them about it and saying, hey, when you slam the cupboard, I get really nervous. What's next? Because that's what my parents used to do when they were really mad at me. So those are conversations that can be really great corrective experiences. If you're with someone who doesn't respect your triggers, that's a different conversation. But definitely know your triggers can be really helpful to improve your emotional self-care. So I know for myself, a trigger is I was in a really bad car accident, 6 years ago, and I totaled my car and I hit a car head on. And so now when I start to see brake slam, I instantly can actually feel like this crazy sensation through my body. And I really tighten up and my neck starts to hurt. And I can't breathe for a second. And I just tighten and there's times where I slam on my brakes, right? Or like overly dramatic. And when people are in the car, they're like, what the heck? And I'm like, oh, sorry. So I know that trigger. So I really try to keep my distance and go slower. But also like the more corrective experiences there are, basically like the more time that has passed through that happening, the more times people have hit on their brake pads in front of me, the less of a response I have, to the trigger, seeing that I'm not going to hit them every time. By the way, knowing your triggers really does you can learn a lot about your triggers through seeking, individual therapy. That can be a really great place to learn them, especially in like cognitive behavioral therapy. All right, acceptance. So it's important to accept good and bad events internally and externally just as they are. So for example, by the way, and acceptance is not forgiveness or giving in, right? It's just accepting it for how it is. So let's say I had a very unhealthy relationship, right? When I was younger, and accepting the relationship for what it was, it's not forgiving them. And it's also not giving in. It's just accepting that experience that I had. Same goes for if you've had trauma. Acceptance is not saying I'm okay with the trauma. It's accepting that it happened to you. Do you wish you didn't have the trauma? Absolutely. I wish you didn't experience trauma. I wish I haven't experienced trauma, right? I wish bad things did not happen, right? And that's okay. So accepting something terrible happened to you is not saying I'm happy it happened or I wouldn't be the person I am without it happening. You can still feel like I really wish this didn't happen and it shouldn't have happened. And it's not okay that it happened, but I'm accepting that this has happened to me. It's kind of a state of mind of it is what it is. And I would say this is more for, it is what it is to more on the lower intensity spectrum of things in your lives happening. So like not getting a job, it is what it is. What can you do, right? It's not tied to your self-worth. Shouldn't, it shouldn't send you in a spiral of I'm never going to get hired. I'm a loser. I'm never going to move out. I'm just going to sit here and cry myself to sleep, right? And we can incorporate positivity into it, but not chronic positivity. Only seeing things in a positive light can minimize the pain, and that's also not good. So there's this big chronic positivity movement of saying, that's not great either, right? But we can see things that we've gained from it. So for me, from that relationship, I have many regrets, I guess, in allowing things to continue as long as they did and be mistreated for as long as I was, right? Where I see positive, so I wish it didn't happen, absolutely. Where I see the positive, I have to say, is my boundaries are so strong now. I did so much self-growth and self-work after that in my current relationship, I am willing to let it go if it is not serving me. And is that scary? Absolutely. But I have to make sure my needs are met. And I'm not going to let history repeat itself in my relationships. And I will set great examples for my children, right? And so that's where we can incorporate positivity, but there's definitely a line between chronic where it's like saying like, oh, it's like, let's say you're sharing your trauma with someone and they're like, well, I think it's really great you experienced, I don't know, something horrible that happened to you because that's what made you such a strong woman today. No, like that's minimizing, and we shouldn't be saying that like someone hitting you or someone sexually abusing you is okay, right? So that's where chronic positivity can come into it. So acceptance is really about the concept of, it hurts right now. I accept it. I don't forgive the person, but I accept the feelings of that pain and that anger and that sadness. Also thinking that I recognize that this wave will pass, right? And this, I know I have learned valuable lessons from this, experience. So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Bye.